Right, guys. So, on today's episode of the podcast, me, Jasper, and Chris, we sit down to talk about sports specific training, or is specificity required and when it is required. So, if you are looking to kind of write your own program, or you're wondering when to become a little bit more specific with the training you are doing, today is a great episode for you. So if you are someone who's really interested in your training and really interested in where to put exercises, this could be a great episode for you. If you're also interested in how we write programs, why we write them the way we do, and kind of the benefits that we're trying to give to our clients, this is also a great episode for you. So we find a lot of people go way too specific, way too early in a program. So this has been a really good conversation around programming, around kind of also periodization, or like kind of linear periodization and conjugate. This is a good discussion around those two topics so I can try and understand them myself, but then you guys can hopefully understand why and how we can train for multiple different goals and how we can train for them at the same time. So without any further ado, I'll just let you get into this episode, guys. Once again, 5-star rating review on iTunes and Spotify. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Real Coaching Radio, the podcast for coaches by coaches. We are here to teach you how to get the most out of your clients and yourself. This is where beauty meets the beast, brains meet brawn, and science meets, well, bro science. Welcome to Real Coaching Radio.
Buy the things I need to buy.
I will buy some of it with you. I am on it, literally.
Mr. Big Dick with all his expensive clients now.
Well, so today's topic, we are going to be talking about specificity, and where did this thought come from? Where did the idea about this come from?
There's a common theme in conversations I think that have come up recently. Between at least the three of us. I don't think we've spoken about it much, but yeah, the idea that a lot of people go into training with this idea that they have to be very specific in their goals, in the way that they train, in their training plans, and I think that's come a lot of. There's a lot of like weird internet fitness gatekeeping or like tribalism, where you're like part of a team and then therefore you have to train like a certain way and it's a specific style to be part of that club, aka I'm a powerlifter, I powerlift and I only powerlift, aka I'm a bodybuilder, I bodybuild and all I do is that, I'm a crossfitter, etc, etc. And a lot of what we've been talking about is how, well, potentially that can hold people back a lot, especially early on. I think it's a terrible idea. And in fact, even up to a very high level, I would say, except for elite lifters, there should be some level of variation and change in the way that you train. Because there's just multiple aspects of health and fitness that aren't all incorporated in just low bar back squatting, deadlifting, and bench pressing, or just doing bicep curls, etc., etc.
So when it comes to this whole idea of specificity, how do you go about dealing with it not becoming too specific? Like, how do you set out a plan or a program for someone, or even like the origin method stuff you guys are doing? Mm-hmm. How is that written in a way so it's not just specific to one thing?
I'll have a little answer then, Jasper can have a little answer. But I think the goal is that you set out your days with different intentions. So in the same way that you'd have, let's say, a body part split, or you'd have a squat, bench, and a deadlift day, you'd have a day that is focused on different types of lifting. So for example, on the origin method, we start with a high intensity day for lower, and the intention of that is lifting heavy, and then having accessories that support that kind of style of training. Then you'll have a day that is lifting fast, and that's our velocity day. And that's all about power, explosiveness, plyometrics. And then that'll have accessories that kind of go with that. And then you might have a day that's more conditioning focused or more skill focused. So you'd be doing more gymnastics and then a conditioning piece. And then in that week, you've hit 3 to 4 aspects of fitness. You can even make it, one day's upper, one's lower. Or like how we do it is one day's lower with upper finishers, and then another day is like weightlifting with gymnastics finishers. And then you can really fit a lot into a week, and you're training lots of different aspects in 1 week. And especially early on, that just opens your, it's like the base of the pyramid. You've got this massively good foundation to then go, I want to specify in this when I come to a competition, or if I'm going to go run a marathon for charity, I now have the requisite fitness to do that. But I also can then come out of that and go straight into going on the beach and looking good.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Because that's part of the thing that I'm still getting my head around in that aspect, because the way that the Origin method's written is based on trying to hit these different things all of the time, right? Whereas the other way of like periodization that I understand is like for a block we focus on one thing, then for a block we focus on another thing. So that is probably is that more or less specific compared to what you guys are doing, in the sense of, I know the Origin method you kind of split down, right? So you'll have parts of it where you'll be like, if you've got a weightlifting focus, you do a certain specific day. Do you know what I mean? Like, you will adjust it slightly. So why have you written it in this way?
I mean, the way we've written it is complicated, but it works really well. The way you were talking about doing like a 4-week block of something linear, we will have not just to keep plugging the program, there is a theme. Every 4 weeks will be potentially a bit more like higher volume for the intensity days, or the weightlifting is like a complex for the first 4 weeks, and heavy accessories, that kind of thing. But even if you're looking at 4 weeks of like linear progression of like, you're going to do 4 weeks of 5x5 back squat.
Yeah.
And then next 4 weeks you can do 6x3, let's say, and just like taper down. I think if you take, let's say, the back squat as a goal for someone, people get too focused on being specific for back squat and only care about their 5x5 back squat, their 6x3 or their 8-2s or whatever, and forget that we see loads of people posting their heavy lifts and stuff, but you don't see the fact they probably do shitload of bird dogs, core work, accessories like hamstrings, abductors, all that sort of thing, like mobility to some description, but they don't post about that. So people only see the I squat heavy all the time. They want to get a better back squat, so all they're going to do is squat. Whereas really you need to be training all the different muscles like hamstrings, glutes, quads, core, back, that kind of thing. Yeah. Under different, single leg variations, that kind of thing, on top of being able to, I don't know, row a 1 kilometer at a decent pace. You actually have the engine to cope with recovering between sets, that kind of thing. So even just with an exercise, people can be so fixated on that they don't train anything else.
Yeah, I think that's part of what happens with, I think that's what happens with every different type of training, in the sense of they get something in their head of how they want it to look and how they want it to be. And it's like, for me, the way that it makes, the way that you guys program that is a way that you need to be good at programming to be able to do that, in the sense of you need to understand what you're trying to get out of the days you're doing. Yeah. If in the sense of you have like an intensity day, or you've got a power day, or you've got a day more focused around gymnastics or skill work, or a day focused more around conditioning, like if you don't understand progression and don't understand the reasoning why, that can quickly turn into throwing shit at the wall.
Yeah, so that is a good point. With something like linear progression, you obviously have a clear, I'm doing this thing and I'm just going to add weight, reps or sets or something like that to progressively overload this movement and therefore get stronger or bigger at the movement. Basically, the style that we use, or a non-specific style or a less specific style, is this conjugate method. And conjugate basically, it very simply just means doing more than one thing at the same time. You're conjugating stuff together, fitness and strength. It's, widely been recognized as like a big powerlifting thing. But what I really like about conjugate is progressive overload isn't linear. Okay, so you're going to have moments where you can't add more reps or sets or weight. It's just not going to be able to do that. And then where we now have like an undulating periodization is you'll build up, you'll go back down a little bit, you'll build up, you'll go back down a little bit. And you have this kind of wave effect, but it's going a wave up diagonally. The thing is with conjugate is what you're doing is you're training different values, let's say, different aspects, and you're improving the skills and dimensions of those aspects. But what's different is when you have a linear progression or you have some sort of like constant progression, the way you're talking, is very prone to basically fatigue. And a big part of this is if you're always squatting 2-3 times a week, benching 2-3 times a week, deadlifting once a week, and you're just adding weight, or even if you're fluctuating the reps and sets and all of that kind of stuff, you're adding fatigue to the point where you have to dump the fatigue to then start again. With conjugate, the idea is that you're trying to avoid that excessive fatigue in 1 week.
Right.
So you have like a really heavy day, but then your velocity day is like excessively lighter.
Yeah.
And so you're never getting to the point where probably will need just for your mental health to deload sometimes, but you're never getting to the point where you need a physical deload because of your CNS. And that way you can keep progressing all these different aspects very in a smaller amount than maybe a 12-week block. But over the year, you may actually find you get bigger gains in multiple aspects than if you really specify, and you might get a massive squat PB, but then you can't walk upstairs because you've got no cardiovascular fitness.
So, okay, all right.
I got a question before we go. Kind of playing devil's advocate. Obviously, we like our program, and it is great, and you should sign up. But on the terms of specificity, I could be squatting 3 times a week, and I could be, let's for argument's sake, say I was back squatting 3 times a week with some variation in my rep schemes. It wasn't just the same 3 things, like same 3 squat sessions every time. That's not necessarily specific, as long as after each squat, that's the first part of my session, I'm doing, let's say, hamstring work, glute work, different things. I'm still covering all my bases. I'm not being like overly specific just to back squat. If all I did was back squat and leave, 100%, that is like too specific.
So
What do you think?
This is where I think about where I say the programming in conjugate, like specificity in the sense of chasing a goal and only training in that certain specific way.
Mm-hmm.
But then the specificity to come into the programming for conjugate is way through the roof. Compared to like a linear program of going, it makes sense that I'm going to get really strong by doing this.
Yeah.
If I just go linear, week to week, add weight, add reps, dump the fatigue, carry that on. Whereas like conjugate, if you don't understand the values you're trying to train, you can very quickly lose sight of what you're doing.
Yeah, so...
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So 2 questions.
Yeah.
Is training squats 3 times a week but with variation, is that specific or too specific? Well, the answer is how much time of your whole training week, so how much time out of the time you spend in the gym are you spending on one movement? So if you're squatting 3 times a week in different variations, we can talk about variations in a second, but if you're squatting in different variations, you're essentially still squatting a certain pattern, you're still moving a certain pattern, training that certain pattern. Now, if you go into the gym 3 times a week and you squat for 30, 40 minutes, you train for an hour and a half, that's like 50% of your training is squatting. That's pretty specific. If you're training 6 times a week and you have 3 more days and you can put like a conditioning day in, you can put more variation in terms of the different values you're trying to adhere to, that's less specific. And if your goal, like us, is quite there is some level of specificity, as we do want to improve our powerlifting and our weightlifting and this stuff. You're going to have to be doing similar movements very often to improve. That is just how skills are built. But it's more about, are you training one style of squatting? Are you only training squatting in volume, squatting in heavy? To slightly go back to a point you made earlier, you were saying about, I will do a strength cycle, a hypertrophy cycle, and whatever. This is really good for extra focusing on those specific aspects. However, whilst you're improving some of those aspects, other aspects are going to fall.
So this is where I want to question, in the sense of, with the conjugate style of programming, you have these multiple things you're trying to hit as you're going through. I wonder if that ends up, is it because you're managing the fatigue better that means it's not diluting the water of what you're trying to get? The reason I'm asking that is, when I come from a bodybuilding background, it's just so easy to get a certain muscle part to grow because we just overload that, in the sense of, and over volume that. So like, when I was trying to get my lats to grow, when I've been trying to get a client's chest to grow, it's like, rather than having this body split, body part split, or having like 4 body sessions, whatever the split is, whether it's 3-4 body sessions a week or a body part split over 5 days, the easiest way for me to then gain more muscle in that certain area is to train that area more. So like, within the conjugate program, you're trying to hit all of these different values. Does that stop your ability to be able to push on one value? Because if I'm trying to gain fitness in a linear sense, then I will make fitness a priority and just try and maintain everything else. Whereas conjugate, are you doing the same thing, you're just managing fatigue in a different way?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, as you are the mind behind the program you've written. But what you said is that you're, targeting specific areas to grow muscle.
Yeah.
The goal, and like I said, correct me if I'm wrong, for conjugate is to be able to lift the most amount of weight. And the 2 days we've got for, let's say, your compound lifts are a heavy day where you work up to a max, like as much weight as you can move, as almost as a skill. Like, obviously you're going heavy to like limit, but we're only doing that once a week to like practice that. And then we have another session of speed, which is to try and like move that way as fast as you can to cross over. And obviously there is hypertrophy work as accessory pieces and like back offsets and that kind of thing. But the program is much more geared up to end goal of like move as much weight as possible, rather than you could spend 16 weeks in a hypertrophy phase or coming out of that on the way to get as big as possible, not necessarily lift as much as possible.
Yeah. So go if you.
Yeah. So 2 things, yes and no. Conjugate is just a term.
Yeah.
So there isn't a specific conjugate. We use a conjugate style or a concurrent method of programming, which is training multiple aspects at the same time. Conjugate has traditionally been used in powerlifting to move the most amount of weight possible, because it's one of the cleverer systems to do that with. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to use conjugate to move the most amount of weight. You could be fitness focused like Mark, but also be maintaining, even building strength while you're improving your fitness. So there's so many great things we pick up on. So I'll try and like redirect us so we hold on to them. You were saying about complexity, as in somebody can't just go in and do conjugate. At a basic level, I'd say that is true. That is true. Conjugate requires a lot of reading and a lot of like understanding of these different aspects, which is why you would want a coach or a program to follow in this. And then you don't necessarily need to understand exactly why certain things are happening, but and this is a fact, conjugate is one of the most tested programs on the planet. It has got the most people Olympic gold medals in the world. So we have science to show that these methodologies that are pretty old now, they're from like the Soviet era, have pretty good effectiveness. There is maybe more efficient, better sciences for, let's say, specifically building strength or muscle or fitness. But the idea of conjugate is we're trying to not just maintain, but actually improve all the aspects, even if there is a little bit of a focus on strength or muscle. And then the muscle question, which is a good one. I think this is just like kind of like conjugate aside, origin method aside, specificity aside, your muscles only need a certain amount of stimulus a week to grow. There's just scientific facts. If you do about 24 sets per muscle, right, you're going to grow. Right, that's it. So whatever program you do, you just need to see, do I have 24 sets of overloading that muscle?
Yeah, this is where I think it gets confusing, because this is where the intensity volume crowd come in, and I'm not going to take it too far away from the specificity chart. And but when it comes to the like volume versus intensity side of it, volume being 24 sets, intensity being the sets don't matter. So you'll have there's two different camps of basically saying there's all of this research around the amount of sets we do, and then you have this group saying we need to be as close to failure as possible, pushing strength as much as possible to gain that muscle. So like JP says, Train by JP on it, like he's got a YouTube series at the moment which is amazing to listen to, and I would just take it with a pinch of salt as you go into this, especially if you're a beginner. For advanced people or people who love training, he's given 1 set per exercise. So he's given 1 set. So the Mike Mensa fucking is intensity like style of training, which is where like the sets thing gets like funny. But the thing that I was talking about earlier about like, if I'm going to be more specific to a certain thing, I'm just going to overload the volume, because I'll get close to that 24 sets with someone who's a beginner who can't push that intensity. Because when it comes to these movements of building muscle by doing 1 set of each thing, that's really difficult to do if you still can't hold positions of movements and you don't have the movement proficiency to do it. So like the specificity that comes into play when I'm like, we're gonna grow our lats by just putting more exercises in to grow your lats, is almost like, it's weird term, but uncouth in the sense of it's not that smart. Because even though it's something I will do and it's so easy to do if you're looking to gain more muscle, so what I'm doing currently is because purely the fact of I'm gonna put more volume into this, I'm gonna be closer to failure more often, I'm gonna create more muscle damage, is gonna allow me to grow muscle. And it's just as straightforward as that. And that's the thing of coming back. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, no. It's really good. No, it's really good. Like,
so like, just like in that sense of like the muscle building side, it's like, understand there's multiple different ways of doing it. I think being close to failure, like within 5 reps of failure and whatever you're doing is great. If you don't know where that is, just send as hard as you can for as long as you can. And like, all that's going to happen is the amount of weight you push is going to be dictated by the amount of sets you're doing. If I've got 1 set and I'm going to go somewhere between 6 to 10 reps, that weight is going to be way heavier than doing 3 sets of 6 to 10 reps.
So, yes, 100%. Everything you said, yes. Like, if you're a beginner, doing an all-out to failure massive set is going to be pretty hard to do without the knowledge, the experience, someone pushing you, the right equipment, the technique, whatever. But if we're talking about, right, let's look at the best way to program someone, and we're looking at they have a certain amount of time in a week, why not try and incorporate both of those aspects in?
It's exactly what I think everyone should be doing. I think people need to come away from the bitch fighting between intensity and volume and understand that if it's like just around the muscle building talk, if you're going to try and build muscle, you need mechanical tension and metabolic stress. Mechanical tension muscle damage coming from those two. So it's like you're going to create that mechanical tension by overloading the muscle and pushing as hard as you can, and then the metabolic stress is going to come from the pump. So it's just like combining the two. The question that started all of this thought in my head was, because I'm going to do that if I'm trying to build muscle for a person, and that's more of a linear way of doing it because we're doing the same exercise, the same week to week, progressively overloading in this very step-by-step way. For conjugate, how do you go about making sure, like, because even though that's more specific, how do you make sure then that you can make conjugate specific?
Why does it have to be the same movement? Here's another one of those things. It's like, I do agree when you're teaching someone, they need to have more experience doing lots of sets of different things. But where you're saying, let's say, for example, I train my lats in a session. So I'm going to do 3 to 4 lat exercises that move the lats heads in different ranges of motion and different positions and target different areas. Why not just do that, but like over a variation? So let's say I need to do my 24 sets for my lats a week, roughly. Let's just throw that number out there for now. So on my intensity day, when I do some upper body and I do some heavy stuff, I'm going to do a couple of heavy sets on like weighted pull-ups or a lat pull down. And then on my velocity day, when I'm doing some faster stuff, maybe I'll do some more volumey back things, and I might do a cable row, and I might do sets of 12 with like slow eccentrics and really try and focus on more of that positioning and stuff. In those 2 days, you've done the 2 different things exactly as you've done in one day, but you've just split them up, not by the fact that you're training lats, but by the fact you've got different motivations for that day, different intentions. And, this is where it gets super brainy and nerdy. You don't even have to have necessarily the same intention across the whole day, and you can have even a daily undulating within session change where you start off by doing really heavy legs, and then because you're already fatigued from that, you might do high rep upper body to finish.
And that's where the specificity chat's so funny, because look how specific that's becoming.
Yeah.
Not specific to a goal, but the specificity of like, I've got to nail this program down to the T to know what I'm doing. When I
see what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So is in like the way that Conjugate is programmed and the way that you guys program Origin Method is so thought through, because it needs to be, because you need to know the intention of what you're doing. We are doing a velocity day, or we're doing a max like strength day.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know what you're trying to get out of that. Yep. Whereas general public, Joe blogs trying to go in to train to get a bit stronger and build some muscle, so much more simple to put them on a linear program, because then the intention of the exercises and what we're doing doesn't get skewed, if that makes sense, because it's really hard for someone to conceptualize. I've got a strength day here, I'm squatting on this day, but it's light, and it's just like, it's conjugate trains a more general fitness. You can use conjugate to train strength, fitness, and all of these different aspects, but it's way more specific on the programming side. So it's way more general in the sense of it can cover more bases, way more specific.
So slight, like, no. So specificity being slightly confused here with, I think, in-depthness, how detailed and focused, there we go, that's probably a better term, focused the coach is on achieving lots of different goals. So the coach has to be really thoughtful. We're not going to use the word specific. Has to be very thoughtful and intentional about what they use and when they use it, for sure.
Why they're using it.
Why they're using it. But to the person, in the same week, they very rarely are training the same aspect twice, and therefore over, if you just extrapolate that over a month of training, they might train 5 different sessions 4 times, different intentions of the sessions, whereas on a periodized program, they might train 3 very similar intentional sessions, heavy, back off, accessories 3 times a week. So they then trained those same 3 sessions, intention, even if the movements are different, 3, 6, 9, 12 times. Whereas in conjugate, you've trained it 4 times in those style sessions, or maybe 8 times. So it's less specific. But if you were looking at your XP bar of your RPG character in life, you're moving up these bars of fitness and conditioning, skills, strength, hypertrophy. They're all still undulating and they're all still going at different times, but they're all moving slowly in one direction. Whereas with this, it would be like one moves up, one moves a bit down, one moves up, this one kind of, and it's like at one point in time, you can have shit fitness and be really strong. At another point in time, you can have really big muscles, getting stronger, but you might like lose some of your skills aspect. You might lose some of your mobility, whatever it is. And if you were to look at a general holistic picture, how I imagine it is, if we went into World War III, right? Bear with me.
Right.
If we went into World War III,
we're off the deep end.
right, and they came and they were like, every young man, woman, and child is going to pick up a gun and go fight the Russians. Sorry, Russia, I'm not, no harm done. They started it, yeah.
Not on this podcast.
We have no political views, it's just banter. Let's say that happens. Right? Do you want to be the guy who's been training for 12 weeks to be massive and strong, but has zero fitness, and when he bends over with his big backpack, cracks his back? Or the guy that has all the skills in tune at one point in time?
I'm going to go over both of you for a minute. I think you're both right, but you're also both kind of just playing to your own card that you are right in everything you've just said, but so is Charlie in the sense of like, you can talk about specificity in such like a broad sense. Like, yes, in Charlie's first 6-week block of just hypertrophy, it's specific to hypertrophy, but he could still be training a variation of exercises which is not specific to any particular like muscle. So it's not just squatting for leg size.
Yeah.
I want to move on because we're going to go round and round.
Yeah,
you wrap it up, and then I'm going to ask a question.
We'll wrap it up and then So my thing is there a way where you can combine, and you tell me if this is what conjugate is, and because this is my pure misunderstanding of it, do we need to subscribe to a system of programming? Because, for example, even though there's a linear aspect to the way that I program, the accessories that I pick and the way that if someone has multiple goals, we still train those multiple goals, just, again, dropping one to be more, like, important than another. Is it in that sense, am I just dumbing down the system of conjugate by going, well, this person they want to improve their back squat, they want to get fitter because they've got like a fucking tough mudder coming up, and they also like doing like weightlifting, for example. So I'm going to put them in a day to do weightlifting, and we've got this program spread out where they're going to train these different aspects. But then depending on where we are, right, we're coming closer towards their tough mudder, fitness is now going to take a priority, and we're just going to make sure that we're pulling some of the fatigue out by reducing the volume on some of these like strength movements, and maybe we're going to like reduce the time we spend doing this weightlifting. Is that what conjugate is, or is it the fact that you're training different values, as we talked about before, of like it's not just we're training the aspect of fitness and we're training the aspect of strength? Is it more like, well, I'm using these different squats compared to this squat because this squat gives me this and this squat gives me that?
Okay. What's your immediate reaction, Jasper, to that?
That's not a summary. So, anyway, answer the question, and then I want to move on to a different topic about specificity rather than this ramble of programming.
Right. The thing is, summary point, conjugate's just a word.
Yep.
Right? Conjugate programming could look different for 100 different people.
Yeah.
There is specific types of conjugate, like West Side Barbell, but we have our own type of conjugate that we use. But conjugate just means training multiple aspects at the same time. That definitely doesn't mean you definitely need to change your squat variation every Monday like we do. It's just a way of incorporating different styles of training or different variation in your training.
Beautiful.
You can do that, and it's basically a form of conjugate.
Yep.
If it was just to outline 3 simple ways, linear progression is doing the same thing but adding a little bit more. A periodized progression would be essentially just a training program, which is you're just dumping fatigue and adding strength, and you're just trying to manage fatigue and add different aspects. So you might have blocks, and then conjugate is you're just trying to train all the aspects at the same time, but you're doing it in a way that you're not like building up loads of fatigue and then dumping it. You're trying to manage that fatigue within the week so you can consistently train all the aspects over the year. And that's like a summary. So you don't need to subscribe to a certain training program, because none of it's, it's all intangible. We all kind of are just programming to our goals. But I would recommend to choose one that hits the most aspects at the same time, rather than one that is just getting you to do, hypertrophy and strength and neglecting your fitness or neglecting your mobility and all that kind of stuff. So
amazing.
Go on, move us on then, Jasper, before you get upset.
Who's got to throw his rain can at me then?
Just looping round, battling with each other.
No, you no, carry on. It's just that I think the conversation's good because I truly have never read anything or learned anything about conjugate. So for me asking the questions is purely because I'm trying to understand the way that you guys incorporate and have created this Origin Method program and how you use it to get all of these goals to like.
And I mean, I think at some point, maybe when we do another 4-way podcast with Mark, is that we should sit down and kind of almost break down what we've done. Yeah. Because, you kind of created this, you didn't create conjugate, you created what we're currently doing off the conjugate system pretty much by yourself, and just like, oh, Jasper, can you write this for this under these kind of constructions? And same thing with Mark. So it would be great to sit down and like strip it all apart, compare it to everything else before we run out of time. Sports specific training. Yeah. So great. If I just classify us all, you are a bit more powerlifting now, Charlie, but you are more of a bodybuilder from like history. Chris is powerlifter. I'm ex-gymnast, trampolining. My training when I was doing trampolining was a lot of core. I was doing a lot of running. Wasn't lifting a huge amount of weights because I thought I needed to be skinny for trampolining, and was training very specifically for that sport to cover the base. I think we can all agree that athletes coming into the gym, regardless of their sport, should be doing form GPP, so like fitness, strength, all muscles being trained and not being entirely sport specific. Can you guys just kind of like throw your spin on what you think sport specific training is and what it should look like?
Yeah, I mean, for me it's conjugate. We're going to train all of these different aspects.
Yes, Charlie, he gets it. Charlie's going to become a conjugate specific coach.
Get me a jumper that says it. No, but like it is, because it's you have to see what goes into the sport and what's required from the athlete, and that you can never have too much of a big base. I think that's where I come from, in the sense of, and I think part of the reason I do this is my own fears and non-understanding of things when it comes to sport specific things, in the sense of when I've got a kickboxer, and for her, there's no point in us trying to go crazy specific in the gym, because she's doing that every single time she kickbox. So every time she goes training, she's doing kickboxing drills, which is the skill element of what she's doing. For me, being specific, I'm there going to try and just focus on, can I get her fitter? Can I get her stronger? Can I can I move her in the plane she moves in, and just make sure that she's got some positional strength within that, if that makes sense.
That sounds like a great way of training someone. I'm just nicking the mic off Chris, and you can come back and say what you're thinking of, but that person being a great example that they do a combat sport. And my biggest pet peeve is when you see people doing like a weighted punch or a weighted kick, where you will tie a cable machine to them and get them to just take punching, because I can't imagine how you'd kick. Yeah, that sort of dumb shit where it's like, we're going to replicate the exact movement pattern you'd go to like kick someone with, but under weight, to make you stronger and faster, and it doesn't work like that.
So this is like Marco says, that you're actually you're unlearning the skill for them of that position and that thing. So it's like, the way I think about it now, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, is I think about because I really struggle to think of like, I think of things as muscles. I think of things as like, how does this muscle work, and how is it supposed to be working in these positions? So like, rather than putting you in the position and training that, I'm going to train the muscle to do its job. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm just giggling because the more you talk, the more I think you don't realize that you do conjugate. But
is the
when
problem.
you train people, specifically athletes, and this is why I think conjugate is so good for athletes, military, police, any services, is because you talk about training muscles, I think about training qualities. And I think that somebody who comes from a combat sport, you can look at it and break it down in terms of qualities. Okay, they need to be explosive. They need to have good fitness. They need to have presence, so they probably need a bit of size. They need to have strength for grappling. You train in qualities. So you split up their training to incorporate days that include strength with a bit of power, fitness with a bit of explosiveness, what it is. That's conjugate. That's all that conjugate means. It just means that you're using those different things. You, looking at an athlete, have to think the athlete is sport specific when they do the sport, right? That is the only time an athlete is sport specific. The only sport specificity as a coach you can give to them is looking at the qualities they need to improve them doing their sport specific training. And that means that I can grapple for longer if I have better fitness. I can do better kicks if I'm more explosive. I can swing a golf club if I have better core stability. But you swinging some sort of weighted woodcutter, now they're doing 100 swings a week, just very simple, 100 swings a week with their golf club, and then you're going to the gym and doing 4 sets of 20. They're doing 80 weird weighted twists that do not replicate their golf swing, and now they've got 2 opposing patterns. And yes, they have proved some aspect of their core stability, but it's not going to transfer over to them somehow swinging harder with the golf club because it's different. And the base level of this is a great topic for conjugate and specificity, is that your muscles have different qualities. You can lift really, really heavy weights, or on the force velocity curve, it's really heavy at the top, and at the very bottom you have pure speed. Purest speed would be something like throwing a baseball. So something that's an object, you can like fucking send it, really throw it, right? That's what's happening with like a golf swing or a kick. That's a different quality from then adding weight, which becomes strength speed or speed strength or power or something. And then if you add even more weight, it's strength. They all help each other, but they do not necessarily transfer. Like if I lift a massive squat, it can potentially help me run faster if I'm doing loads of sprint training. But if I lift a massive squat, Charlie, how fast can you sprint?
Oh, fucking ratio. So like you're Georging it and I'm Lennying it because like I break it right down to like this, just like, but because of how I understand
But
things.
both ways work as long as it's not you doing the sport in the gym.
Yes, yeah. So and that's basically, that's the top of, that is the statement, right? Is just don't replicate the sport when you're in the gym.
Yeah.
That's
Because for, punching, golf swing, baseball bat swinging, that sort of thing, whatever that's called.
sports ball.
You think about that like rotation. If you like picture someone throwing a punch or hitting a golf swing, they like rotate their upper body. So most people think, you need a big upper body to hit something hard. I can't remember who it was, but some US golfer like destroyed the distance they can drive a ball, whatever that is, from the start. I don't know.
It's going well.
Yeah. But the reason he did that is because he had a massive squat and a massive deadlift. So that rotation, they like turn their hips into the swing.
Yeah.
And this guy has a massive ass. And yeah, he's just producing like power from his lower body. Nothing to do. Obviously, he probably does have a strong core and upper body as well. But he's not necessarily training golf swings in the gym. He is lifting a heavy weight.
Yeah.
Which then when he goes back to his golf swing, he's so much more powerful.
Yeah, because that's the thing with like people go way too specific way too soon with things like this because, and I think it's just, I don't understand to the deepest level that there possibly is of things, but I understand like what we need to train and what we need to do by looking at your sport. Like, and I know for a fact there is no point in us working on skills because I don't do skills. Yeah, so like, is that my? Ignore that. But when it comes to like training someone and training these qualities, it's an overview. It's an overall whole that I'm trying to look at and going like, what muscles, what do I need to produce here? They need strong legs, because when in like the kickboxing, when she's blitzing, she's got to be basically triple extension. So it's like, okay, so we can work on those type of qualities of improving triple extension. And it doesn't need to be really complicated. I don't need to bring like Olympic weightlifting in, purely because I don't have that amount of time with her. I can just make her do a box jump, and it's training that ability. This the whole speed strength curve. It's like, I'm gonna make her do a box jump, and I'm gonna make her do weighted jump squats, and I'm gonna make her back squat heavy.
Yeah.
We're gonna improve her
You're
speed
gonna hit,
and strength.
You're gonna hit all three of those points. Yeah, like, so I think a good question, which I'll pose, is like, so basically we're saying, and I say this to be controversial, but if your coach is being really like, I am this coach and I'm really good at training boxers, let's say, and you go in and you're doing like boxing style training, I think you should find a different coach. I think you should find a coach that improves all the qualities, and having a boxing coach for your boxing, because it's kind of a gimmick to attract a certain crowd to make money, rather than looking at coaches who is like an S&C coach who should be able to train any sports team in the world, basically, and may have different slight variations of specificity towards a more upper dominant sport or a more hip dominant sport or whatever it is. So that's one aspect. But the question I have is like, when should people actually be specific in their training? And I obviously have an answer, but I'll pose it to the room.
This is going to have to be like our last bit, and we're going to have to wrap this up, but this has been great. I would say like people have to become more specific in the sense of managing fatigue around the competitions that they're doing. So I think the specificity doesn't come from the movement patterns and trying to replicate the sport. That's not becoming more specific. I think becoming more specific means, what do they need as they get closer to competition? So it's like in the off season of a rugby season, for example, we are going to put on as much muscle and get you as strong as we possibly can. As soon as we start to come closer to a season, we're going to try and maintain that strength, because there's no point trying to push it on because we'll get fatigued, but we're going to try and improve that fitness element. And that fitness element can start from aerobic exercise throughout that off season, but I would take a 4 to 8 week period. Some teams don't go that long of like strength work to build up that strength. So then as we get closer to a competition, we've got some body armor, we've got that strength. Let's maintain that, because otherwise you're going to cause way too much fatigue. And that's what I think about with like Grace having fights coming up, is like when I program for her, I've got all of her fights written down. I've got the most important ones written down next to them, so I can then make sure that as we're getting closer towards these competitions, the things she needs, she's got available to her, rather than nailing her, trying to get her strong and doing all of these things and trying to fucking make her jump through a hoop, because that's more sport specific. It's like, it's not. What's sport specific for her at this point is like, are you fit enough to do your job? Yes, okay, so we are at this point going to be training more anaerobic style of, not only you do 2 minutes on, 1 minute rest for 3 rounds, not only are we going to train something similar to that, how does those rounds look within the fight? Oh, you've got quick bursts of 10 seconds movements. Okay, as we get closer, we're going to do bursts of 10 seconds, and then we're going to do like some lower heart rate stuff for a minute. Then we're going to go again, and we're going to start to bring that more specific in.
Yeah. On top of that, I think if you're an athlete, like Grace, kickbox, or Joe that's championing, and you're either being programmed to just go in the gym, treat your competition season like you would build up for a PB. That you should have all the training done like 2 weeks before your comp or your PB. Do you know what I mean? You should be ready. You got to dump a little bit of fatigue, peak, do it. So that a week or two out from a competition, whether it's kickboxing or championing or even rugby match, slightly different, but something that maybe only happens like once or twice a year, you don't need to be in the gym 2 weeks before. You should have that strength and fitness. You then need to be sport specific. Go and kickbox 3 times a week before the comp. Go and train on the trampoline 3 times a week before the comp. Do all your routines and your skills training for the comp.
That's beautiful.
And then do that. Fuck the gym. You don't need to be in the gym even arguably like maybe a month. Like strength and fitness doesn't disappear that quick. You've got to hone your skills.
Anything.
Yeah.
Like those 2 weeks out, you are not gaining anything. When Grace comes in for 2 weeks, I am basically like not letting her fall over.
Yeah.
Like just kind of move, like, and feel better.
Right. Do you want to give us your answer and then little wrap up for the?
You can wrap it all up because my
Yeah.
brain's hurting.
So, yeah, basically exactly that. But when it comes to when you should be specific, overall, for the average person, or athlete, it should be coming up into competition, just like these guys said. You should be honing down on practicing the skill more often. And if that is, for example, powerlifting and you're lifting heavier weights, you should be lifting heavy weights often, but at the same time trying to reduce fatigue so you're more efficient at doing the skill and you have less fatigue so you can do the skill to your maximum effort when you come to competition day. But literally, this is the thing. By this point, like they said, the work is done. Like when you get to this point, the work is done. So to then overall summarize when you should be specific, unless you are in the top 1% of the world, unless you are literally going to be the strongest guy, until you know that you're nearly the strongest guy, the fastest guy, you have a shot at being the best kickboxer, I would really seriously consider looking at your training to improve most aspects, because you want to come into that. The bigger the base of the pyramid, the more solid the foundations, the bigger and stronger the pyramid can be. And as you grow through your career, I'd rather be the person who has everything there ready to go than having to train my fitness at a level where it's at this point you should just be trying to get better at kickboxing, better at powerlifting, better at trampolining, whatever it is. So specificity is the tip of the pyramid. And when you're doing sport-specific training, that should be really looking at you being like, I'm going to be the fucking best at this and I'm going to win. Till that point, you should be training for all aspects: health, strength, fitness, mobility, whatever it is, because that will improve your whole entire experience of life. It'll improve quality in the gym, so it's more enjoyable. And generally, they all benefit each other. The fitter you are, the more sets you can do, the stronger you can get, the more muscle you can build. So
I think that's it.
That
That is it overall. The idea of specificity needs to be dropped from replicating sports within the gym, and it needs to be focused on the qualities that people need as they go into their competition. Managing fatigue as we get closer to that is the thing that we're pretty much going to be needing to drop off as we're in the weight room, and it is just as simple as that. It's not about replicating things, it's about making the athlete's life so much easier.
yeah, ready to perform. This has been Real Coaching Radio.
My brain hurts, I want to cry, but I'm really excited.
Same. It's going to be good.
Thank you for that conversation. Got anything else? Amazing. Right, guys, we'll see you in the next one.
Hopefully you enjoyed that episode. Me, Chris, and Jasper. It was really nice to sit down with like three of us today. Sorry about my mic if my mic sounded a bit funny. We've been trying to sort the audio out for a couple of weeks now. We've been having a lot of problems, like a lot of technical issues that we're trying to sort out. What I do want to say though is this podcast is going to be designed around helping clients and helping people just get their fitness goals, but also just around health, fitness, and lifestyle. We're going to be doing a lot more interviews coming up, and one of those is going to be starting next week with a guy called Raphael. He was a really interesting guy to interview, so kind of stay tuned for that one so you can hear more of how other coaches start to kind of train their clients, not just how we three today and us four, including Mark, actually think about programming, think about clients, think about coaching. And that was part of the conversation today is coaches get way too specific way too often, and it's something that we want to address with when you are dealing with athletes, when you're dealing with general public as well who have this strength, fitness, burn body fat, gain muscle goal. It's still a process of trying to keep them fit and healthy for as long of a period as possible, and not just focusing and hyper focusing on one aspect of health and fitness, for example. So trying to incorporate more ways and multiple ways of training, but also incorporating multiple goals that we're trying to hit can be very difficult, which is why having this conversation has been so important. Thank you once again for tuning in, guys. You can find any of us on social media if you want to get in contact with us. You can find me at Hat the Body, Hat the Mind. You can find Mark at Mark Origin Series, Chris at _symbiotic_chimp, Jasper at Jasper Skule. Thank you once again, guys, for tuning in. We will see you on the next one.